hallway light beneath my hotel door went completely dark, like something was standing directly outside, and a strange man later told me they don't always leave the moment you answer. If stories like this keep you up at night, hit subscribe, because ever since that night, I count doors to the stairwell every time I check into a hotel. This happened in the fall of 2025, during a sales trip through a small town in Missouri. I'd spent the entire day driving across the northwest part of the state, hitting more than 60 sales leads. By the time I got back to my hotel that evening, I was completely drained, but I still had work left to finish, so I spent several hours on my laptop scheduling emails for the next morning. The hotel itself was a normal mid-tier place, not a chain, but not a budget motel either. A Western log cabin kind of aesthetic, genuinely cozy. From check-in until the next morning, I never once saw another guest on my floor. That detail matters later. I was staying on the 3rd floor, the top floor of the building. Around 11:30 p.m., still working at the desk, I heard activity out in the hallway. Footsteps, a door opening, a few urgent voices. Didn't think much of it. Hotels are noisy, people come and go at all hours. About 15 minutes later, I decided to head downstairs for a bottle of water from the vending machine. Stepping into the hallway, I saw a gurney positioned halfway inside a room 3 doors down. 2 imps stood in the doorway. A man who looked to be in his 60s lying on the stretcher, though I could only make out part of his arm and torso. Assuming it was a routine medical call, I didn't stare, just went back to my room. 10 minutes after that, I stepped out again to finally grab that water. This time the gurney was fully in the hallway, one imp performing chest compressions, the other watching a portable heart monitor. I heard the flatline tone clearly. That's when I understood the man was either dying or already gone. The imp monitoring the machine told me firmly to return to my room. I did. The clock read 12:18 a.m. when I stepped back inside. Even after what I'd just seen, my mind stayed restless, and I kept working for another half hour before finally getting into bed around 12 a.m. A few minutes later, I heard what sounded like 3 soft knocks on my door, quiet enough that I couldn't be fully certain they were even real. I assumed building settling or plumbing and ignored it. Less than a minute later, the exact same pattern again. 3 knocks, louder this time. I got up, checked the peephole, empty hallway. As I stepped back, I noticed the door handle slowly depress, gently, like someone was quietly testing whether it was locked. Something came over me in that moment, unlike anything I've felt before. I couldn't bring myself to look through the peephole again. My eyes went instead to the thin strip of light beneath the door. It went dark, exactly like something was standing directly outside, blocking the hallway light. The darkness held for several seconds, then the light returned. Right after, I heard a faint brushing sound against the outside of the door, like fingers or an arm being dragged slowly across it. Then, silence. Despite legally carrying a firearm on that trip, I was completely frozen, gripped by a dread I'd never experienced before. I turned on a lamp and spent the next hour wide awake, watching videos on my phone, trying to distract myself from it. Eventually, another sound in the hallway. A door opening, from the exact room where the imps had been earlier. Then quiet muttering, too faint to make out any words. Relieved at the thought of another guest being awake, I finally opened my own door. A man was stepping out of that same room, not hotel staff, not an empty dark slacks, a white button-down shirt like someone traveling for business, mid-40s maybe. What stood out most were his eyes, unusually sunken, like he hadn't slept properly in months. I asked if he'd been with the man taken away by Ems earlier. He turned to face me, went quiet for a couple of seconds, then nodded, said there had been 3 knocks and that the 3rd time was when they answered. Confused, I asked what he meant. A small smile crossed his face before he calmly said that they don't always leave right away. Then he turned and walked toward the stairwell without another word. Needless to say, I barely slept the rest of that night. The next morning, around 8:30, exhausted and still trying to make sense of it all, I went downstairs for coffee and stopped at the front desk to ask about the medical emergency from the night before. The woman working there looked genuinely confused, said she had no idea what I was referring to. I explained the paramedics, the CPR in the hallway, all of it. As I kept talking, she seemed to take more interest, but told me the room I was describing had actually been vacant. The last registered guest had checked out the day before and had checked in alone. She mentioned occupancy had been unusually low the past few weeks, only a handful of guests on my floor, and all of them at the opposite end of the hallway. Then she asked me to confirm the room I was describing was exactly 3 doors down from room 312. That's when it all connected. The incident, 3 doors away, my room, 312. The knocking, always in threes. In the strange man's exact words, 3 knocks, and the 3rd time was when they answered. It was one of the most unsettling realizations of my life, like standing in the middle of something that simply didn't add up no matter how I looked at it. I've spent countless hours trying to explain every piece of it since. Maybe the front desk employee, who'd only just started her shift, simply hadn't been told. Maybe hotel policy kept her from discussing it directly. Maybe the strange man was just another guest, playing an unusually cruel joke. Maybe the knocking really was just the building. The handle never actually moved, and exhaustion made me imagine the rest. Maybe the hallway light flickered from an electrical issue. I've even questioned whether the entire thing was some unusually vivid stress dream. But none of those explanations account for every single detail. What still bothers me most is how everything kept circling back to the number 3. For nearly 3 weeks afterward, I wasn't quite myself. Different mood, different focus. If anyone asked, I just blamed work stress. I didn't want this to be the story that convinced everyone I was losing it. Eventually, I moved past most of it, though I still don't like sitting with the memory for too long. I still travel constantly for work, and nothing remotely similar has happened since. That same morning, once I finished talking to the front desk, I packed up and left as quickly as I could. Checkout was completely uneventful, and I even noticed several perfectly ordinary guests staying at the far end of my floor. Even so, ever since that trip, I've developed a habit I can't quite shake. Every time I check into a hotel now, I automatically count how many doors separate my room from the stairwell and pay close attention to anything involving the number 3. The knocking that night always came in groups of 3, but it only ever happened twice while I was there. And that's the one thing about the whole experience I'm still strangely grateful for. Because if I'm ever standing in a hotel room and hear a 3rd set of 3 knocks, I won't be sticking around to find out who answers. What that night left me with more than the fear itself is a quiet respect for the moments that don't add up no matter how hard you try to explain them. Sometimes the most reasonable response to something unexplained isn't to solve it, it's to simply leave it behind and keep moving. If you've ever had an experience like this, something that still doesn't sit right with you, no matter how many explanations you've tried, I'd genuinely love to hear it. Drop your story in the comments because some of the best ones I cover started exactly this way.